Yes, well, so my though my father was British and my mother Austrian, we moved to Greece in the 1960s. So I don't remember ever being anywhere before Greece. We lived outside Athens in a place called Gargitos, near Koropi. So all of those areas in Attica where Arvanitika was spoken, and Atavitra in those years, like in the 60s and 70s, they were still, Flizne Iberistete. They spoke Arvanitika. So it was still quite there. For instance, I remember it wasn't within the family in that sense. It was more like a community thing. The person who had our house must have been in his 40s at the time and had a bit of trouble speaking Greek. That was quite interesting. It was unusual. People made fun of him for that. So he wasn't a Shkieror, he wasn't a Greek, he was an Alberor and Arvanitis. So that there it was the community thing. Then also we like many Greeks, which sort of became Greek in a way, sort of adopted the ways. We also had our village, the Choriomas, as we might say in Greek. So that would have been that was in the Stymphalia area, also in the Peloponnese. So there as well, that was another exposure. And then the most important exposure was when my mother remarried into a Greek family, and then Barbacim, like my favorite uncle, was very much of an Arvanitis, and we spoke exclusively Arvanitika. So it was a bit of an unusual situation. Like he was pleased that that he had somebody to talk to, actually, really. So we would hang out for hours, and it was just on and on and on. So that was perhaps the most the biggest influence, which is why I think when I speak Arvanitika, it's more the Peloponnesian kind than the Attica kind. I've heard in other videos, for instance, we might say, we would say Destepi, we wouldn't say Nestepi. So you hear it's different. And I remember also in Attica, there weren't any shs. We have them in Corinth. So that's the experience. I would say initially maybe more in the community, and then completely within the home and nowhere else.
So the connection between me and Albanian and the place where I've been exposed to the Albanian language. So my relationship is solemnly with the Albanian language, and specifically the Southern Tosk dialect of Gjirokastra. So my mother is from Albania, from Gjirokastra, and my father is from Peloponnese. I'm born in 1993. And my parents got married in 1991, which, as you might know, it was a very difficult period for Albanians in Greece. So I got exposed to Albanian language from the very first time, from the time I was born. So it is practically my mother tongue, my first mother tongue, because my mom spoke to me and to my brother solemnly in Albanian, alongside with Greek with my father, of course. So for the first years, the only connection between me and Albanian was me speaking with my mom, my grandmother, my grandfather, my relatives when they came to visit us. But especially when I was little, we would visit Albania in the summer for 2 or 3 months. So then I would have a real exposure to how Albanian is spoken in Albania. And this is where my Albanian skills really got evolved by these 3 months every summer. The next thing which is really important for me and my connection with Albanian is that, as I said before, it was a really difficult period for Albanians in Greece. And sometimes it was even difficult to speak Albanian on the streets. And beside this, my mother and my mother's side, they were really, really supportive and they insisted in speaking Albanian wherever we are. Fortunately for me, my father actually, he was very supportive as well. He was one of a kind in these difficult times, so he was very supportive that my mom spoke to us in Albanian. So I had a really pleasant introduction to Albanian connection to Albanian language. Yes, in regards with Arvanitika, I got really amazed when I realized how close it is, especially to my southern dialect. Tosk, when I started reading the first traditional songs in Arvanitika, I felt really close by understanding almost everything. And yes, I think this is it pretty much.
So my contact with Arvanitika, I heard about Arvanitika for the first time when I was like 7 or 8. And that same day, I somehow managed to write on a paper about 10 words that I learned from my father and my godfather. However, I never spoke it with my father or something. Now I lived in Belgium, and I live in Belgium, and a little bit like Victor, during summer, always 2 months in the village, which is Tishero. I could accidentally sometimes hear my grandfather with his brothers or the neighbors speaking Arvanitika, but yeah, accidentally actually. Then in Belgium, I came in contact with Albanians. In my class, I had a very good friend. And if friends are the family you choose, then I could say he's like my brother today. Then I met more people. I always felt a kind of bond with the Albanians I met. I felt and I saw, because it's obvious that they were different. We were different because what we have experienced through life, the background, the education, etc. But there was this one common point that I felt was important to me. Then I first went to Albania in 2015, and to Sicily, to Piana and Consenza in 2016. And from then, every time I went on vacation to the village, I wanted to learn more about the language. I was lucky to find in Tishero a lot of people who know the language really fluently and were willing to help. And yeah, now I'm kind of myself able to communicate in Arvanitika.
Yeah, I was born in 1981 in the UK, and that was a time when there were no Albanians from Albania or Kosovo in the UK. And my first exposure really was from my mother using words which were commands. So actually my first words were in Arberisht. Those words were the typical words like vemi, cha, yits, also things like klimsh, do klimsh, uya, diali, and then noni and nona for grandfather and grandmother, vovi and vova for uncle and auntie, buka, and a typical one, quieto, which is shut up, basically. And my exposure, other than that, was really family only. There were only 5 families that we knew of from our village, which is Santa Cristina Gela, or Sandakstein in Arbe, which is in Sicily near Palermo. And in the UK, there were only 5 families from there, most of whom were first generation immigrants that came in the 50s. I'm actually second generation, born and raised in the UK. So I'm quite a rare case because I'm the only one of my cousins in the UK who can speak Arbe. So yeah, every week we used to call my auntie and uncle who lived in Sicily on the telephone, and then the whole family would come. And back in those days, not every family had a telephone. So they would gather on a Sunday, because there's literally like 40 people at Sunday dinner in Sicily. So they were all there and they would all come on the phone and I would say things, and everyone was so happy that I was speaking Arbe. And then in the 90s, so when I was at high school, maybe about 15 years old, there were 2 people in my class who were new arrivals from Kulkas in Albania. And the first time I heard them speak, I thought they were from Italy. And I spoke to them in Arbe because I understood that they were speaking some kind of dialect of my language. And yeah, just my exposure to other varieties of Albanian came at that time.
All right, thank you everyone. For the next section, I will ask you a couple of questions. Please write your answer on a card or a piece of paper. So starting with the first question. Is your variety a dialect or a language? 3, 2, 1. So maybe let's take Victor, who had kind of different answer. Maybe what do you think, Victor? What is the main difference between a dialect and a language?
This can take hours, but I'll try to describe it in a nutshell. Most people, let's start with a common understanding, what people think it is, the difference between a dialect and a language. People think that the more differences there are, this is what makes it a different language. Of course, we have a lot of examples around the globe with languages that are almost identical, and there are centuries that they think that no, we are different languages. So I would say that the first factor to name your speech, your mother's tongue, to name it language or dialect, is your own will. What do you want to call it? That's the first thing. And the second factor that it will take hours to discuss is political reasons that influence people's way of thinking. Maybe there's can be some, no, I don't want to say profit. I can't find the right word right now. Anyway, there are some political reasons. This will take a long time. So yeah, I think the major thing is people's will, what people want to call it. So the amount of differences shouldn't matter.
Peter, you wrote language. Let me just refer to you. You wrote a piece, Musings of a Terminal Speaker, back in 2010. You said, many of our villagers insist that Arvanitika is not a bona fide language, but just a way of speaking. So why are you not have the same opinion as the villagers?
Actually, that's an interesting point, and it's slightly different. It ties in, I think, to what Victor was saying, that, well, let me first of all say, linguists come to the village and say, okay, listen, you're a dialect, okay, let's face it. No, we're a language. No, you're a dialect. So, and I agree that and then they don't want to speak to the linguists. And actually, there have been conferences and suggestions to linguists, calm down, be a bit more sensitive to what the community wants. If you want them to be warm and welcoming. They came to our village and were chased with sticks to leave because they did not want to talk. So there's a sort of hostility there. Yeah. So anyway. Now, when they say it's not a language, it's like Greek is a language, was the idea, and for us, it's like on one hand they would say glucha trimerishta, like the valiant tongue, right, is what we speak. Then they might also say that it's an idioma, like an idiom. It's just like we just put one word after the other. We don't really have a language. So it's perhaps more like a perception. But I'm glad you reminded me of that, because I didn't remember that one little statement there, because I wrote that quite a few years ago. And that was more tied into the fact that of perceiving Greek as a language with school, academy, the language, and we just talk, we just put one word after the other. But that has perhaps changed to some extent. I would say that has perhaps changed as well with my uncle, who I also saw him change his own perception of the fact that this is quite a rich language with a past. So we are maybe confused. But one thing you will not hear is that it's an Albanian dialect. That's something that they don't want to identify with. In other words, Albania is the mother tongue, and we are part of Albania, and we speak that dialect. And that's probably because for centuries and centuries there has not really been that contact. And as I mentioned a bit earlier, the awareness wasn't there until the Albanian migration that there is even any kind of connection whatsoever. Because I'd like to remind you, Albania was completely and absolutely sealed off. Like in my day, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, nothing came out of Albania. So I never met an Albanian before 1991, 92.
I think Dimitri's northern, so Thracian Arvanitika is in a bit of the same situation. So maybe Dimitri, you can add to that what Peter said. You also wrote that Thracian Arvanitika is a language, right?
Yes, I would say language, but if I say dialect, that immediately implies that's a dialect of a standard language. So what standard language would that be? Albanian? Well, as Peter said, the same is in my village. Like we don't, or at least the people don't feel any bond, or there was no bond for centuries. So dialect of Albanian, that would be not very correct to say, or that's not what the people would like to say. So I guess that's the reflection I had behind writing language. Simple as that.
Thank you. Martin, you think Arbe is a language? Why?
Yeah, well, because like Victor said, there's really a kind of distinction between a socio-political identity. We can look at things like Croatian and Serbian, and Bosnian and Macedonian versus Bulgarian, and even Portuguese and Spanish, Valencian and Catalan, things like that. So even though they're typologically almost identical in many respects, there are other factors that distinguish them. So I think in the case of Croatian and Serbian, it's a lot to do with history and religion, and even orthography, the alphabet that they used, a few words here and there. And then typologically, you could say that they're the same language from a linguistic perspective. But I think that there's a little bit of a misconception that people have, that sort of a linguist would define this as a dialect rather than a language. Okay, from a typological perspective, they would say that these languages are very close to each other, that the distance is very not very far. Whereas the distance between, for example, Arbe, the Arbe that I speak, and Geg, which is supposed to also be a dialect of Albanian, is so huge, you know, like we cannot communicate with each other unless we have a shared other language that we speak. Whereas a Portuguese speaker and a Spanish speaker, or a Croatian speaker and a Serbian speaker, would have no problem communicating. So from a linguistic perspective, intelligibility is quite an important factor. It's said that if two speakers can communicate with no problem, then they speak the same language. If they can't, they speak another language. So from my perspective, I think that Arbe is typologically an Albanian language rather than the Albanian language, or a dialect of the Albanian language. I think that one of the problems we have is that we don't talk about the Albanian languages. And we don't really have a word to cover that sort of subgroup of languages. So I think that that's my perspective. And also, I know that from a lot of people in my community, when they first met Albanians in the 90s, they were expecting to be able to communicate, and they even thought that the Albanians speak a better version of our language. And this reflects on what Dimitri said about a standardized language, you know, so they thought, oh, this is a standard language, so it must be that they speak better than us. But actually they couldn't understand each other, and it took sometimes months for people to be able to understand each other. And ironically, even though they had that view originally, that ours was maybe a dialect of their language, they used to, especially old women, used to turn around to people and say, to Albanian people and say, can you please speak properly in Albanian? So which is in a reversal of what usually happens. So I think that's to kind of clarify a little bit what I think about it. Yeah.
Actually, one thing that I find very interesting about the Italian communities, and it's not quite clear to me, but unlike the Arvanitika communities, so you have schooling, from what I understand, also university courses. From what I understand also, and like we in Greece also have Greco communities, in other words, communities in southern, near your villages where a form of Greek is spoken. We send teachers from Greece so that they learn proper Greek, not the language they speak. So which might be a good thing, but I'm also a bit worried about that sometimes, as in like, is that plus I've seen in your communities, and it's fascinating, and it seems very interesting, and it might be the way to go. I'm not sure, because we do nothing. So of course, Arvanitika is not really going to survive, as far as from what I understand and from what I see. But in your communities, there seem to be movements with passionate and fluent Arbe speakers who want to clean the language of Italianisms, who want to bring in things. I mean, I hear them say things like naturisht, which I know is Albanian. We wouldn't say that. Like naturally, you know, these sort of new neologisms, let's say. Anyway, I'm going on at some length here, but I find that interesting, and I'm not sure, because at least you guys are doing something we're not. So I don't want to say, wow, how strange, you see.
So this is a perfect segue to the next question I was about to ask you. Do new words help or harm your variety? So on 1, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm giving the word back to Peter.
Well, the problem with Arvanitika is that it crystallized at a certain point, I think before electricity came in, which actually was pretty late, I must say. So maybe that's the wrong thing to say, because many of the villages in the 60s and 70s didn't have electricity. But let's say words like electricity, words like anything to do with anything 20th century, avtokinito, car, would come in from Greek. So those words, I would have, on one part of me would say that the Greek words that come in are not harmful, but the shift of life, you know, when we talk about iPhones and TikTok videos and online platforms and stuff like that, I mean, we really come to a point where if we are going to speak Arvanitika, which we don't at this point anyway, but if we were, then maybe a verb or two would be Arvanitika, and everything else, you know, thorny, screen, this, that, the other, would be Greek. Like how could you tell me how, you know, how to sync my MacBook Air with my iPhone in Arvanitika. So that's one thing. So it's a problem. Now the movement to say we're not like things like, you know, preps the cash you have to have, which we say preps. Preps is originally Greek, but it means, you know. So now let's not do preps. Let's use the Albanian word for that. You know, let's not do nuku ishte to idio. It's not the same. To idio is Greek, but it's classical Arvanitika from. So let's not say to idio. Let's bring in some real speakers, not people like us from Albania, to sort of teach us how to say these things properly. Let's clean up the language. Let's remove all Greek aspects. Let's move up things like xelodur, like to how do we say xelodur in English? I'm a translator, how to know this. Xelodur, Victoria Pesmo. So you're tired.
I would just say to rest.
Right, thank you.
I don't
Well,
know,
to untire
rest.
yourself. Like says
Wow.
Greek, lodur is.
Okay.
So we're at a point where my Arvanitika is better than my English, so I'm sorry. Anyway, so in other words, drop Greek prepositions, drop this, that, and the other, and clean the language. Well, that would kill it. Then we might as well just start speaking the real thing, which is Albanian and not what we speak. So yeah. And I say that, of course, with a touch of irony, just in case.
Martin, you wrote harm. Why is that?
Yeah, I think it kind of picks up a little bit on what Peter just said, that if we start, quote unquote, cleaning our language, then we end up with a different language. It's not the language that we speak. And I've done some research on the amount of lexicon in my language that comes, where does it come from? It mainly, in some cases, like almost 30% vocabulary comes from Sicilian. A large percentage comes from this Albanian origin of our language. And I mean, even there's Greek words, maybe even 10% are Greek words. And then there are Italian words. And an interesting thing that happens in our language is that most of the Sicilian lexicon, which has been developed over 500 years, is completely nativized into our language. So it's things like new things in our language that our ancestors didn't have another word for, and they just incorporated it straight away. And interestingly, we don't have words for example, animals, shoes, flowers. All of these kinds of words are equal, the same or similar to the Albanian words, but anybody that works with them is a Sicilian word. So linguistically speak, from a historical linguistics perspective, that would hint that our ancestors didn't work with animals, didn't do manual labor, probably because they were nobility at the time, which is a common, let's say, origin myth of our community, that we were Albanian nobility that were expelled. They spent 200 years in the Peloponnese, in Morea, and then they came to what's now Italy. But, you know, are those words Arbe? Well, yes, because they've been Arbe words for 500 years. So, you know, for example, one of the words that my mum always used to say to me was studiare, which means hurry up. An Italian doesn't understand that word, a Sicilian doesn't understand that word, and it comes from a medieval Sicilian word, which has completely changed now. Modern Sicilian speakers wouldn't understand it at all. But that word is my language. That word is Arbe, studiare. Then we say things like, Jamavete me a macchina, or Jamavete me macchinen, I'm going with the car. Macchina is a word that comes from Italian, but in my village we say macchinen, so we decline it in Arbe. But in Piana, which we call hora, they don't decline it in Arbe, they decline it in Sicilian, so they say Jamavete me a macchina. But either way, that way of speaking is accepted as Arbe by everybody. We might have 10 or 15 people in our community that really want to clean our language, purify it. And they've written textbooks for the school, but those textbooks have not been popular because people look at them, children learn them at school, then they go home and their parents don't understand what they're talking about. It's neither Albanian nor Arbe. So I say that those words that people are importing from standard Albanian they do harm our language. And also from an identity perspective, I've heard very often people using words, people who have studied at the University of Palermo and done these language courses, using words like ilaç for medicine instead of medicina. And they think, oh, this is a pure word. This is a pure Albanian word, because that's what they've been taught. But medicina nor ilaç are pure Albanian words. So at some point we have to accept that our language has never been pure. Maybe the most basic level of our language, like the words that I used, that I learned from my mum when I was a baby, maybe that's the pure language. On top of that, everything is new, like every language. And I'll stop there because I could speak all day about this subject.
Thank you, Martin. So Victor and Dimitri had both help. So Victor, why do you think it helps for Southern Tosc or Arvanitika? Which is it?
I think I will speak for the Albanian language. I won't speak about Arvanitika in this case because I completely agree with Peter's and Martin's point of view, but the situation is completely different about Arvanitika because it's an almost extinct language. So I completely agree with their point of view, but if it helps or not, it's a different thing when it comes to a language. And I'm going to speak about, so my southern dialect of Albanian doesn't face this problem because they think they are an unbreakable part of the standard Albanian language. Actually, the biggest part of the standard Albanian language is from the south, not exactly from my hometown, from a neighboring hometown. So I'm going to comment on that. I think that new words help as long as they are being imported naturally, in a natural way, in an unconscious way, and not forcibly. For example, the way in Arbe they say macchina, I think from Italian. This happened naturally. It doesn't mean that the Italian Ministry of Education came to their village and said, you're going to use macchina. This happened naturally. Perhaps in Arvanitika, it happened naturally, unconsciously. So this is absolutely okay. New words help. Of course, every language consists of new words. It's a complete illusion if we think that our language is 100% pure and clean. English, you know very well, it's the most widespread language in the globe, and linguists sometimes they thought they should classify it as a Romance language, although it's a Germanic one because of the amount of Latin words. The same thing about Albanian, like Albanians, sometimes we are really proud of how ancient is our language and unique. But actually, if you check the vocabulary, linguists claim that 500 words are Indo-European cognate, which means like real Indo-European words far from the past, connected with other Indo-European languages. And all the rest are Latin, Greek, Slavic words, a huge amount of Slavic words. So my advice to people who want to import words to their dialects and languages is do it unconsciously, support this decision, and in the future it will be an unbreakable part of your mother tongue. Like it happened, for example, in Albanian. This is my last notice. There are many words in Albanian that we got from Slavic languages in the Middle Ages. And since this happened so far in the past, it doesn't ring a bell that it's a Slavic word. It sounds absolutely Albanian. For example, all the verbs that end in it, pergatit, and other verbs like that. This it is from the Slavic infinitive iti. But today, when you speak Albanian, literally it doesn't ring a bell. So it is an Albanian word. It's not Slavic anymore. So the same way perhaps it's Arvanit word, it's not Greek, and machina is a Arbe word. It's not Italian anymore.
Martin, shortly.
Yeah, you just really reminded me actually, because a lot of people, especially in my village, for thank you, they say grazie, which is a little bit different from the way that Sicilians say it. We have the grazie. And then some people say, no, this is not a real Arberesh word. The real Arberesh word is techaristis, which of course also we say, but in Piana they say it more than in our village. And parkales, so the answer to techaristis is to parkales. So are they real Arberesh words? Is Chora, the name of the village, a real Arberesh word, or is it a Greek word? And then when you said about the declination coming from the infinitive in Slavic, the same thing happens in our Greek verbs, that they end in is. So charistisum, charistisian, parkalesium, etc., etc. So I just really noticed that to us, those verbs like I confess, skomorisum, they are totally Greek origin verbs, but we accept them as Arberesh. And faleminderit, nobody would say,
So, Dimitri, you also think that new words would help Arvanitika?
Yes, actually, my view is a little bit of the previous tree I heard. So I will maybe give some examples. By the way, Peter, I think the correct translation for xelodor would be unfatigue, no?
Well, the literal translation, yeah. So the word the syllable by syllable. But xelodor, it's like it's so natural. But unfatigue, I think you in the UK or the US, you'd say, oh, I need to unfatigue somewhat. I think people go, what? Oh, I think even Lord Fauntleroy wouldn't quite say that. So it's just a natural way of saying it. But yes, actually, I would say if we had parentheses so that people really understand what the word is doing, then yes, unfatigue.
And the word is doing the same as in Greek, kourajome, xekourajome. Fatigue and fatigue, actually.
Right. So the xe comes from there, and it's when we say nani kata nani kata, I mean that's Greek. So it's just all these but they're of Greek origin, but you'd think twice. There are two types of imports: those that happened centuries ago, like xelodor, which is a natural part of the language, and then other things where the word actually is a newer import, or because the speaker doesn't remember the word.
Yeah. To go on, as you all said about αυτοκίνητο and the car. In my village, for example, we have αυτοκίνητο is called Arbe. Arbe is the old cars that we had. I don't know how do you say that in English, actually, the Arbe. But what is interesting, or automobile, we say also, which is automobile, right? From French. But what we have, and is interesting, is for a motorcycle, we say machina. Of course, this comes from, let's say, the Greek mechani, but they kind of somewhere heard, I guess, machina, and they guessed that, okay, machina, mechani, mechanaki, so machina is the motorcycle. And we use the word carriage or automobile for αυτοκίνητο. That is for about the car. And now what I liked about what Victor said is that the new words that come should come in a natural way. Now sometimes you have maybe some occasions where you could kind of do it by yourself. For example, we were translating with someone of Feres, of a next village, the Sperinos Agapis in Arvanitika, as to read it in the church. It's the Vespers of Love during Easter, right? And so at some point, there is this phrase, this is like John 20, 19 to 25. And at some point, Jesus comes and says, peace be upon you. How are you going to say peace? In no natural way, peace will enter our language. So what did we do? We checked the Albanian, it said pace, right? So Greek irini te juve will be weird. So we said pace. In the end, it comes from Latin, or is related with Latin pax. So we integrated pace. That's maybe with some words I would accept, like to have a look to other languages and what would be more natural, like for the language. But for the most part, I think it should be in a natural way, like Victor said.
Thank you. Yes, Victor?
Something that I would like to add is that even this process is not natural. I think you can do it in a language that is struggling to survive, but you could do it in a nice way. For example, xelodou or xelovem, it exists in Albanian, and the Albanian xe is ch. So we say in Albanian chlodem. And in every verb, like the Latin de, that something is, it's the opposite action. In Albanian, in all the verbs, there are many verbs where you can use ch for the Greek xe. So you can make a survey. If in Arvanitika, you can find the prefix ch in some other word, so you can justify that, you know, guys, we are going to use chlodem because in this word, you use ch, so why not? So in this case, I think it's okay to change a little bit if it's going to help the dialect to survive. For example, in Northern Arvanitika, maybe you don't have pace, but God knows, maybe there is a specific adjective for a quiet person. I don't know, in Albanian we say iurt, but maybe in your villages, you might say suar, something like this. So maybe you can justify that, you know, peace, pace could work because in this adjective for a calm person, you use something really close to this word.
To continue the discussion, because this was also a good segue to the next part. Should your variety be standardized by linking it to Albanian grammar and orthography? Yes or no? So 3, 2, 1. What do you think, Martin?
I think this is something that has been a process for the last century, I guess, in our community. That it started with a famous person called Giuseppe Schirò, or they know him as Zef Schirò, who was writing in, I suppose, the turn of the 20th century. And he was taking part in I think it's called the Congress of Monastir, if I'm correct, the Congress of Monastir. So the Monastir alphabet, which is actually called something else on top of it. I can't remember the name for it, but he took part in developing that orthography. So in a way, there was this kind of influence, but then he's also got a book called Canti Sacri, which means sacred songs. And in that book, he doesn't use the orthography that is the Monastir version. And this is the orthography that people tend to consider is correct in our community. However, most people don't use it. So we have very sort of low literacy rates in our own language, high literacy rates above the average for the surrounding villages in Italian, but low literacy in Arbe. But with the advent of WhatsApp and Facebook, which is Facebook's probably been the last 20 years or so, I see every day people using an orthography which is kind of in between the Monastir one and the Italian one, actually. And I'm on sort of sitting on two, whatever the word is. I've got 1 foot on one side of the border and 1 foot on the other side about this issue, because I think it's important for people to be able to read material, for them to be able to, for example, have children's books. We don't have any children's books in our language. And I imagine primary school children who have already started learning Italian and they've already had that drilled into them. Why actually have books that are in another alphabet and then, well, in another style of the same alphabet, which they don't recognize? I think it's more important that they be able to read more easily in a style that reflects the other language that they're using. This parts quite dramatically from the normally accepted idea that we should adopt Albanian orthography. But on top of that, the Albanian orthography has a lot of sounds that, well, we have a lot of sounds that are not represented in Albanian, like sh, sheya for shade, shadow. We have r, this isn't in the Albanian orthography. So, and also kh as well. And also people don't recognize things like XH. So somebody called Zappini, she did a study about this 10 years ago, and she found that most people, 99% of people, didn't recognize letters like XH. When they saw it on the street sign or in books, they couldn't represent that. They didn't recognize the word. So I think from that perspective, it's important, if we're going to say that our language should be standardized and have an orthography, I think for the Arbe case, it makes more sense for it to kind of reflect Italian more than Albanian.
Dimitri, you said that yes, it should be standardized, and but why should it be standardized, linking it to Albanian grammar and orthography? And are you thinking about using the Greek or the Latin alphabet?
First of all, yeah, it's just a thought, right? It could be no also, but for sure, I think the Greek script, because otherwise it would just be war here in the village. I'm sure about that. Now I think a lot of Arvanites did that in Greece. They developed like a Greek alphabet with some Latin elements in it, like for example the y or the d, for example, as to avoid to have, if you have in duery, for example, if you write it only in Greek, you should have, because D in Greek is NT, right? So you would have NNT. That would be a little bit complicated. So maybe 2 or 3 Latin letters. Now, why? I think if you want to learn it somewhere, let it be 1 hour on school or something, I think people should have like, what is the, for every sound, 1 letter, as to be sure that it is pronounced correctly. We can look at Albanian orthography and grammar for that, because I think in Manastir there were many people, intellectuals, and they did a great work there. So it's a system that is on a similar language and can be actually copied in at some points. Now, our point for the Arvanites is more that our language keeps on like to be spoken. So it's not that we are going to write books or something in Arvanitika, or I don't think so. So maybe this standardized version has to learn it, but the point is more like to keep it spoken. And whatever the writing, if I write to my father in Arvanitika, I could write it just as to be readable. And I think also if you look at Albanians, when they speak like on the internet or something, you don't have many people using like the E with 2 dots on it, for example, or like the orthography is not really respected outside of formal occasions. So it's a yes, we can look at Albanian grammar and orthography, but yeah, it's a little bit relative.
Peter, what do you think about standardizing a minority language?
Well, in an ideal world, I think I'd be happy if there were an Arvanit Academy that of Arvanites, you know, we have the situation of, you know, everyone writes the way they want. And so you have like Shtepi, as I mentioned, house, with 2 sigma, 2 S's. Somebody might do the nye, right? For one would be maybe a Greek ni, and then a J. Now, my uncle wouldn't accept the J, it's foreign. And Arvanitika is a Greek language, Homeric. So we don't want any foreign influences. There's also, it's the language of the Greek is the language of the Bible. The alphabet is the language of the Bible, Greek alphabet. So there's also a Christian element. Now, I've seen a video where I think Dimitris was talking about Titos Yochalas, who's done some incredible work. Am I right? A linguist who's done some incredible work on language documentation and different dialects within Greece. So one of the problems is that everything is written as if it were Albanian, which could make sense because the sounds are more represented, you know, with an Albanian, with the E, for instance, with the 2 dots on it. So it could technically make sense, but it has really angered people. And he had come to our village in the 80s. He spoke to some of the aunts, like Aunt Maria and so on, who'd given information, language, dialogues and things like that. So unfortunately, but I don't know what else he could have done, you know. So his work was technical. He speaks about Arvanika, the Albanian language. So anyway, I'm really complicating the matter, but to put it maybe more succinctly, it would be good if there were an academy that could do that. It is too late for Arvanitika. It's not going to happen. So I don't know what to say. If there were an academy that standardized, that would be interesting. I mean, we've seen issues with Breton and with other languages where there is a standardization, and of course the villagers say, yeah, but we won't accept that. We have our own way. So there's always a problem with that, but at least that would be maybe a guideline if there were a Greek academy that said this is what it is, you know.
Thank you. Maybe there will be some people that will take on this challenge and create an academy like this. Victor, do you maybe have something to say?
Yes, although my dialect is standardized, I have some things to say. I think that if you standardize a dialect or an independent language, I don't think it's a very big deal. I mean, if you look in Bulgaria, the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, they have recognized 3 different standard forms of the Bulgarian language. The one is the Bulgarian language, the other, I'm not gonna talk about this because it's a controversial topic, and the third one is the Banatsky Bulgarian, which is a very small complex of villages in modern day Serbia. So you might say, why do these people need that? I mean, they are in the middle of Serbia. They can go to Bulgaria whenever they want. They can write in Bulgarian. But the Academy of Sciences did that for the X or Y reason. It doesn't concern us right now. So I think the same thing can happen. I think the same thing can happen with Arvanitika, Arbe, resh, Northern Arvanitika. It doesn't mean that if you standardize Northern or Southern Arvanitika, it should be a full standardization that you can find papers in the tax office. It shouldn't reach that level. It can reach a lower level. So the language survives and it doesn't extinct, because the same problem that these languages are going through, also dialects go through this problem. That, for example, my dialect from Gjirokastra, Albania, if you know, it has a very strong sense of localization. Like, people feel really connected to their local cities. So the fact that the people from Gjirokastra are from the south, it doesn't mean that they have exactly the same words with everyone in the south. They locals are very proud for the fact that they have a huge amount of words that are not being understood in Permet, Saranda, Vlora, Koicha, which are neighboring southern towns. So, but these words are fading. These words are fading because young people consider them as very archaic, very old, Arabic, Turkish words, Greek words in the Gjirokastra dialect. So they just keep some generic features of a southern accent and vocabulary, but that's it. So the same danger happens also in dialects. A nice example is the Greek language, but this will take ages to discuss that. Greece is a bit aggressive to dialect. Maybe in another topic, this one.
Martin?
That's really interesting, Victor, because we have the same mentality as well. Every Arbe village has a certain amount of words which are completely different from the other village. In my village, my heritage village, our word for yes is ara, which apparently comes from Greek. There's some kind of word in Greek that means something similar. And in Hora, which is about 3 kilometers away, the word for yes is o. Then if you go to Contessa and Telina, which is 60 kilometers away, their word for yes is orai. So we're all very proud of the fact that we say ara, they say o, the other one says orai. And our word for clothes is broicht, which apparently comes from the verb mbronje, to protect. Apparently it's got some ancient meaning about armor, like that soldiers wear. Whereas in Piana, the word is pethka, which means material. So there's this really kind of like pride that, in my village, we say it like this. And then there's also a competition as well. So Piana is our hora, our big brother. So they think that they speak better than us and vice versa. And I think that's also kind of complicates standardization, because if we standardize Arbe, which word do we use? So I think this is where polynomy comes in. So the type of standardization that they use in Corsica, where you recognize diversity, but maybe you have the same orthography, so everyone can easily read what they can easily read, but it has to kind of reflect the local variety. And of course, this is an expensive project, so how will it happen? I don't know, but I just thought that was interesting that there's this Southern Albanian thing, and we also have that.
Going to the next question, is your variety an ethnic or linguistic identity marker? 3, 2, 1. Linguistic, ethnic. Okay, yes.
So I think a typical Albanites would say, u jam vero arberor, jam vero Elin, not Skleror, Elin. So I'm a true Arvanitis, but I'm also a true Greek. So I think everyone. I mean, I want to be a bit careful because I am an outsider in that sense, of course, biologically speaking. But let's say the community would identify as 100% Greek, but speaking this language. That is the general trend that I've always come across. I've never seen any or heard of any thought of either secession or that we are different or that we should need our own homelands. It is just the way it is. Tied into that as well is the fact that many of the major generals in 1821 and many of the fighters in 1821 during the revolution, the War of Independence for the Ottoman Empire, against the Ottoman Empire, were Arvanit heroes. So there's also that pride that modern Greece has become what it is because of us, the Arvanites. So there is no feeling of it's 100% a linguistic thing, I think, in Greece, from what my experience has been.
Dimitri?
I totally agree with Peter. I think also on what he said about if in an ideal world there would be an academy in Greece who would help standardizing the language, an academy in Greece, which would be like a Greek institution. That's the only way it could be accepted in their heads, I think. I literally went yesterday to an old woman here in the village. I'm at my hometown in Greece now. And she said to me, Yam Elinida, Yam Arvanitisa. And then she said, As Shiptarka. So As is Turkish. I don't know what she did, but it made total sense for her, you know? And yes, so definitely linguistic, nothing more to add.
Martin?
I think that we have a very interesting situation, which is reflecting the Arvanites situation, because I grew up hearing there was no question that my family were not Sicilian. We are Sicilian. My family was from Sicily and Italy even, although Sicily comes before Italy for Sicilians. And again, more so in my village than in Piana. Piana has a little bit more of an Albanian identity, although not among everybody, maybe among the scholars more, maybe in the church a little bit more, but for most people on the ground, Sicilian is definitely the primary identity. And the thing that, as I started to understand that we were a bit different, because of the language, I used to ask my grandparents and my family members, and they said, we are Sicilians that have a different language. And in our language, we do not make the distinction between ourselves and Sicilians who don't speak our language in terms of nationality, in terms of ethnicity. Because of the language, the people that don't speak Arbe are called Latins, liti, or litire for women. And in Italian, our word that distinguishes us from Sicilian speakers is Greci. We're the Greci, which means Greeks, versus the Latins, I Latini. So I think this is very like mirroring the Arvanites situation. And of course, nowadays, there will be people for romantic reasons. They want to kind of say, Arbe is our ethnicity. But this isn't something that I grew up with, and this is not a traditional view. This is really kind of a modern phenomenon.
So I'm giving the word to Victor, and I also have a question for Victor, since you are specialized in Greek minority languages.
Yes.
Does the fact that in Northern Greeks, the Slavic-speaking Greeks are closer to the border, does that linguistic identity also swaps then into ethnic identity because of the proximity?
I've realized from my research in my PhD that there can be found clearly 3 different layers of national identity in the Slavic people of modern-day Florina and Kastoria city towns, actually. There can be more than 3 layers, of course. It can be more complicated than that, but I'm going to cite the 3 layers. So the first national identity that national understanding that they might have is that we are completely Greeks, more Greek than the Greeks. We speak an ancient Greek language, which is completely Slavic by somehow. So this is the first thing. Those people, they have been patronized by the Greek state in the 50s, the 60s, and even before that. In the 2 dictatorships that Greek had, the Metaxa, the dictatorship, and Junta dictatorship, there was a huge campaign in these villages to make them change identity. This is a very interesting topic. The second layer of identity can be that we are both. We are Greeks, but we think it's cool that we speak a different regional language that we call Nashiot, which means in Slavic our language. And the third layer that I can't say with certainty if it's really widespread, the third layer is people from this minority, a linguistic minority, that they emigrated to Yugoslavia, to either modern-day Serbia or modern-day Northern Macedonia. They integrated there. They saw that their mother speech, their mother tongue, it's really close to them. So they then realized that there is some ties that the Greek state didn't let us approach, didn't let us get closer to them. There are many incidents. Those locals, they would travel to Northern Macedonia after the 90s, and police would make a body check and they would find some cassettes with Macedonian music, Northern Macedonian music, and they would break them in the checkpoint or other stuff that shows ethnical connection to that. So yeah, this is it for Northern Greek Slavic-speaking people.
Thank you. The last question. Is it harder to change the social or to change the political acceptance of your variety? So which is a greater obstacle, the social acceptance or the political acceptance? Maybe, Victor, you can use Arvanitika. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Let's start with Peter.
Well, actually, I was going to cheat and say both, but that might have been unfair. It might have been an easy way out. Let me say about the political, first of all. It would really be good if Greece would sign the minority language treaty and ratify it. It would be great if there were radio, if there were some monies that would create programs. Now, on the other hand, what I'm saying probably would sound very strange to the Arbanites. They would say, "Ya pio logo," and they would say it in Greek. What's the reason? The reason also being that really, what I say about Arvanitika is really a reflection personally of the 70s and early 80s and not of now, at least in my experience. I saw a video that Martin had done with a young speaker from from Attica, and I was very, very, very surprised to hear him speak, because I've never seen anything like that. I mean, of that age. I mean, I'd like to ask him, like, what is the situation? I keep thinking, are there maybe some villages where it's happening, and I'm just somehow not aware of it? I mean, and when I say that, I don't mean northern villages like Tihero, which is a different situation, but let's say villages in Attica around Thebes, in the south, in the Peloponnese. But no, like in Ayanis, you won't hear Arvanitika now. My cousins don't identify as such, don't speak it. I mean, they're my age, so that's kind of interesting. So anyway, I'm wandering down memory lane, and I'm wandering off. But the social problem is that linguists will speak about language death, language murder, and language suicide. Now, the murder comes from the dominant language, and one shouldn't say that necessarily but the language is so dominant that it kills off this weaker, smaller language. So that's what linguists will say. But they will also say language suicide when the community decides not to speak it anymore. It doesn't make sense. It's better not to speak it. It was even when you think that, well, Greek is what it is, not what we're doing. You know, we shouldn't. It's a language of the school, the language of Homer, the language of literature. That's the language of the army. So that's, and in fact, the army. I mean, I will very quickly bring that up, but we've had long army. So when you were 18, 19, 20, you would go to the army, right, in Greece, and it used to be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years, depending on the period. And that's where many Arvanites actually had to learn Greek. So that was one of the big changes as well. You have to learn the language, otherwise, you know, we're in a dangerous situation when something is said, you're in war and you don't understand. So it was seen also to a very large extent as a very important thing that Greece has one language, one religion, one nation, and this is pretty much why it is also a political problem, not just a social one. So yeah. I think of a Russian proverb, Babushka nadvoje skazala. Grandmother said it this way and that, meaning I've just said yes to one, yes to the other, no to one, no to the other.
Victor, you had social.
I was about to write both as well, but as Peter said, I think it wouldn't be fair. So regarding Arvanitika, as Peter said, the situation is not bright. It's not good at all. There are many obstacles. The language will soon disappear, and you can see this happening gradually. For example, as I told you, in my home town, in my home region, let's say Ilia, there are some toponyms that show Arvanitaki, Arvaniti, something like that. There are many people with this surname, but I'm absolutely sure that if you ask even the oldest great-grandfathers from this family, like, do you have any connection to Arvanitas? They would say no, definitely. So in the narrative of my home region, Ilia, there isn't such thing as to have a connection to Arvanitas. Maybe to some villages close to the borders with Achaia region, yes, something is going on there, but not really that much. And that shows that the identity really disappeared a long time ago. Of course, Arvanitas were not so many in my home region. They were more concentrated in Attica and Corinthia region. So as Peter said, people today don't speak it. Sometimes I realize that there is a tendency among young people. They think it's cool that they have some roots from there and they mention some words. But yes, the future is not, it's not very bright. And another very important fact to that is that so complicated. It's like a mosaic. It's like you have a mosaic and you try to put on the one side the white pattern and on the other side the colorful pattern, because the Arvanitic identity is part of the Greek identity. So I don't even know if we can have a discussion if there is any social or political obstacle to that. I don't think right now we can make them two different ones. I think it's one part of the same thing.
Yes, because the Arvanites' history is also so intertwined with the creation of the Greek state, like Peter mentioned. So they cannot exclude each other. Whereas in Thrace, Dimitri, you say that it is rather a political obstacle than a social one.
Well, first of all, I want to say that here in the village, there are no youngsters that speak the language outside or something like that. The only thing would be like just words, you know, like they speak in Greek and they would say like lere to thema ekremes, like just the word lere. Let's not speak about it anymore, or shihe, or gyupia, or something like that. But really small words, nothing more. Now I had some interest and I learned it. Other generation is like, if you go to people that are 40, 45, you can find like 5 exemplars, let's say, in the village that speak the language correctly. So it's a little bit the same situation as in the rest of Greece, although I understood the nuance that Peter wanted to give. Now, social or political, I would say, accordingly with what Victor said, like that there is this tendency that Arvanitika is kind of cool. So there is not anymore this social that people feel inferior with the language. This does not exist anymore, at least in my generation. So the problem of the acceptance, not of the identity of Arvanites, because you said the variety. So I'm speaking solely on the linguistic aspect. So if socially it's accepted and people think it's cool, that means that they might be interested in learning the language. So what would be the problem today to do that? Well, the political level, because you should have to do some administration and get into some kind of a situation that you don't really know how it's going to finish. That's why I think it's more a political issue.
Martin, you think also that is a political issue for arborists in Italy?
Yes, because socially there isn't really a problem. At least in our villages. I know it's different in other regions of Italy, but we don't have, and nobody in our villages really has a negative view of our language. There's a prestige. It's seen as a source of pride that we have this language. It's even seen as more prestigious than the Albanian of the recent immigrants. And it's seen as more prestigious than Sicilian, for sure. Absolutely, there's almost this kind of superiority complex that some people have. But yeah, so from that perspective, there's not really a problem. And most children who have both parents who speak Arbe still speak it. There's no issue there. It's mainly in mixed families, although even that in itself is new. So I think, but from a political perspective, there is an issue in Italy that they accept languages which are associated with a national, with a nation state. So the Slavic speakers in Molise, they are called Croats. The Franco-Provençal speakers, they're called French speakers. And we are called Albanian speakers. And so the Italian law kind of protects the Albanian language, which in reality is a problem because it doesn't translate well in actual linguistic projects or in standardization or anything like that. And so we have all these villages with street signs in standard Albanian. And that I think very much is a political issue. But yeah, like I said, socially, there's definitely no problem.
Wanted to ask Peter something now that we're speaking about this. In the same article that Franz was saying, like the musings of a terminal speaker, I'm reading literally, when in the 90s, the European Bureau of Lesser Used Languages sent linguists to survey the state of our language, the villagers felt that it was some sort of plot and chased them off with sticks. Now, I'm not interested in the plot, but I'm kind of, I wanted to know like about the facts. What was it about? Who, or do you have any more information about that?
Well, so that ties in with the, and you know, as I've heard everyone speak, I'm also thinking it is really a political problem first. So maybe I'm wavering on that political problem, in the sense that Greece for 100 years, and I'm speaking just broadly, has hammered in the fact that Greece is Greek language, like one language, one people, one religion. Maybe so it is what it is. I mean, that's what's happened. Now, what that also does, of course, is that the minority languages, and there are quite a few, there are different Slavic, right? There's Nashtata or Nash, right? There's Pomakika, there is Tsakonika, there's Vlachika, the language that is of Latin background. The fact that the Vlache, right? That's a sort of a swear word. Unfortunate. I mean, how is one to develop a true pride? Although I will say that the Vlachi are, in many ways, I feel, well put together, and they are more proud of their language and heritage, maybe than we Arbanites, I say. Maybe a dangerous thing to say again, but I will say, for instance, also that we don't like to speak Arvanitika in front of other people, maybe because we might be perceived as foreign. We are Greek, after all. So there is that switch. It is in a language. That is a problem, you see. We cannot speak it with pride and say that's what we are, you know. I don't know how controversial this is, what I'm saying, but this is really actually what I have experienced. The fact that there is that fear that we might be perceived as not being Greek, and it is so important to be Greek. It is so important to us because we are, right, is the feeling, and we are what is being told. And look at Greek with its language and its poetry and its history and so on and so forth, and look at us, you know. Nick Shupaso and Nyatra says, I said just one word after the other, it's not a language, right? So I don't know, there's all this conflict and maybe a lot of self-esteem on one side, and then absolutely no self-esteem on the other, and that terrible mix that has confused things.
Victor?
Peter, can you give us a good translation in English for the Greek saying Arvanitiko kefali? Like,
Arvanitiko kefali is an Arvanitic head. That means that you are a, you know, you're a well, boor is one word that you might say, thick-necked, stubborn, because, you know, you are a villager, you are uneducated, you don't really speak Greek, look at you, you have the sort of, so all of these things, so talking to you is so difficult, you know. It's like, come on, just don't be so stubborn, don't be so thick-necked,
be normal,
yokel. Yeah. So these are some of the problems, like when you and your language, as I mentioned, the Vlache, like, you know, which is probably even worse, isn't it? I mean, than Arvanitiko kefali, because they could say, yes, the Arvanites might answer, well, yes, I'm stubborn because I know best, you know. So at least there can be some kind of an answer, whereas to some of these other negative ethnic, let's say, slurs, which are there, you know. So what is one to say?
Okay, guys, thank you very much. Me personally, I would stay longer, for hours maybe, but we have to wrap things up. Thank you very much. I think we did a great job in showing the major differences and also similarities between Arvanitika and Arbe. By now, I hope the audience has a better understanding of the historical, contextual, and social and situational nature of the language, and not think of those languages as Albanian. They are languages on their own. I want to thank everyone for participating, and see you next time.
See you soon.
Shifa me së shpejti.
Mirëmbëq, mirëmbrëma.
So miru gdipshit.
Shëndet beriket. I would say Drompambuk. So good harvest, good health, and may your road be cotton wool.